Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 25. It's called In Theory. So full spoilers for the episode as always. And this episode, Data gets a girlfriend. That is the premise. There's a bit more to it than that. In fact, if anything, I would argue that my biggest fault with this episode might be that it's that for half the episode, and then it really quickly becomes about something else that's way more serious, and then reverts to be back to being about that in the last minute. it's very odd
pretty
feeling
much.
Episode. But
usually, you have the ongoing, the important plot, so to speak, and then the personal plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the important plot basically doesn't exist outside of like one or two little tiny things. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're doing this for 10 minutes now.
Yeah. Like you say, there's a couple of little odd things, but it was presented in such a small way, such a non-important way that I kind of never took it as anything than building to just like a fun B plot in the background that'll have maybe like a comedic payoff, or because the first couple of times it's like, someone might have been in Data's room, and then the second time, someone might have been in Picard's ready room and knocked over his little mug that he drinks his tea in, and that's basically, I was like, there's going to be some sort of joke, maybe there's like a monkey on board or something, like rummaging through the ship or something, I don't know, but it felt like it was going to be something silly because it didn't seem like that serious, and then all of a sudden there's like a 10-15 minute section in the back half of the episode where, oh shit, we're in jeopardy, and maybe the most horrific death we've ever had in this show happens. And
I was like, when it got to that, I was like, I want more of this.
Yeah, that scene is glorious. The scene with the random, for lack of a better term, a red shirt, like her death, where she phases like halfway through the floor and just like is sitting, like, or she's sitting, she's like standing, sticking out of the floor with her, like, just blood coming out of her nose, like completely still. It's actually a horror movie. It's horrific, and
it went full body horror. The
best possible way. It's just like a very, almost I'm thinking like a, From Beyond / Reanimator / that with a bit more maybe Lovecraftian, but mixed with a bit of Cronenberg body horror. Like there's stuff going on in there that's really fun and interesting. But that's actually only what, about a third of the episode's about. The other two-thirds...
It's a very focused third, though. You have that, you have Picard having to go off in the shuttle, making this big speech to Riker, being like, no, this is something I have to do.
Yeah, because Picard has to go out, because essentially what's happening is that they're going through this nebula that's unexplored, and there's some weird anomaly where there's little pockets of whatever that is causing whatever touches it to phase out of reality for however long it's in contact, which is what's happening to these little pockets of the ship. And Picard has to go out, and because they have to get really close with the sensor that Data is made for them on the shuttle, they have to get very close. So it has to be the shuttle because it's smaller, it can maneuver, it can get in close, it can duck and dive. Ships, obviously the Enterprise is quite big. It takes a lot to turn it around. Big beefy boy. But this is the thing, while this is going on, the actual main plot of the episode, which is Data's dating someone, is completely forgotten about because it's not relevant to anything that's going on during all the
It's like, no.
tension.
Bigger things to worry about right now, and it's just not there. And it's not even like, because the character, that the girlfriend, she's not involved in any of this. She's not there in any of this.
No. Yeah, you either made it feel more relevant to the romance stuff, or what most episodes with a plot like this would do is that it would feel like the B plot, like the romance with Data would feel like a B plot. That it wouldn't be a problem that it doesn't interfere when the main plot gets important, because it's always just kind of a fun B plot that'll have a little payoff at the end. But there's so much focus on it that first half of the episode that it feels like the A plot.
It does, and I think it's jarring because they established that Data and this woman work together quite frequently. That so it's like, okay, well, when the crisis is going on, why not just have her working as well and have a little bit of interaction between her and Data working together, as a couple as well.
Yeah, there's a few problems with the romantic side itself, though. I think that pops up. two in particular. One I'm just going to joke about, the other one's a serious point. The one I'm going to joke about is, so there's a montage, and it's a funny montage where Data goes around asking advice if, should he engage in a romantic relationship, and he goes to various people, and a few of them are quite funny. Picard at the end's quite funny because Picard's like, look, as soon as I have advice for you about what a woman wants, I'll give it to you. But I don't have any for you, so he just walks away. That was funny. Worf
was funny.
Yeah, getting protective, like a father figure, was kind of funny. And it's that intense close up to really sell the comedy of it.
And even the beat where Data goes to leave and then stops and comes out and goes, I understand.
But the funniest one is that it cuts to, because everyone's been kind of hesitant, but it cuts to Riker and goes, go for it. Yeah, she's an attractive woman, go for it. Of course Riker's up for it. My problem with this, though, is that he's saying, oh, you're going to discover things, Data. And he has this big smile on. I'm like, wait a minute. Tasha Yar begs to differ here. Tasha Yar already had her way with Data way back in like episode 2.
He was talking about feelings, Pete. Terrible person.
It was most documented on this very review show, might I add, that Tasha Yar used Data like a sex toy. So it's not like he's not had some hanky-panky before. Now, admittedly, maybe this is more consensual than that original time was, but this is not necessarily that new for him, at least in some ways. Again, like I say, that's more of a jokey point because I was thinking about it and I was giving myself a chuckle, right? But the more serious point is that the entire arc for this character Jenna, is that she's just broken up with someone and she keeps going back with the wrong guys and she makes all the wrong choices, but then she starts to get attracted to Data because Data's so point and blank and just says, like, he says things in a really matter-of-fact way, but a lot of it does actually comfort her, right? He uses things that are true to comfort her, and she kind of grows attached and attracted to Data. The problem I have with this is that her arc for the episode, where she ultimately gets to by the end, where she realizes she has to split up with Data because ultimately he's never actually going to feel anything for her. He's still ultimately an android, and she's just like Data to him, no pun intended. And it was very Dr. Manhattan. You know in Watchmen when Laurie gets upset that Manhattan's doing other things while they're having sex. Like that moment where she says, hey, what were you thinking while you were kissing me? And he lists like 10 things. And one of them is the kiss, but the other 9 were
I think one of them was what sort of brand of food he should give to his cat, basically.
It's just like, well, I'm glad I was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's that very thing. And I'm like, I could have told you this in the first time you looked at him with those eyes. I could have told you how this was going to end, and you should have known that this was going to end this way. Now, look, if you were going to give me a story where she convinces herself of otherwise, and then ultimately it's the harsh reality that she's tricked herself into thinking that it could be more than a relationship with someone who will feel something for her, fine. But because it never really does that, it just kind of felt like I was just kind of judging her at the end, where I was like, wait, you should have seen this coming. Like, of course, this was always going to be how Data was.
While I'm not really defending it, because I agree with what you're saying here, I think the episode is slightly aware of this, because I think it was Geordie's advice. He's like, look, you're basically the rebound guy.
Yes.
And so it's kind of aware that the show is aware this was never going to last, and it's not that she shouldn't be doing this, but more that making this mistake, as it were, is essentially something that she needs to do to recognize and move on from it and understand. It's like, because she's grown at the end, right?
Yeah, no, she has. I guess I just didn't enjoy watching it enough to justify the point it's making.
I agree. I think there are moments that it's amusing and fun, but a lot of the time it does feel like it's just kind of going through the motions.
Yeah, like because of course there's a point where the joke that he's saying things in a very, very matter-of-fact way, or he's just spouting like factual truths at her, that it stops being funny that she's finding it attractive, and then when it kind of turns and he's kind of doing it in a way that's making her feel bad because he's not accepting a gift properly, or he's not responding to a bit of affection properly, or whatever, it, like they try to go for the jokes where she gives him a gift, and then she says, go back to doing your painting, because that's what he was doing when she walked in, and he goes back to his painting because he just takes it as a matter of fact. And she's like, no, like, bit of advice, when the girlfriend says, go, like, just giving you a gift, you stop what you're doing and you pay attention, like complete and utter attention to her. And he's like, okay. And they do the little joke at the end of the scene where she actually says, okay, then you can go back to painting, I'm going to leave. And he sort of like hesitates, and he's like, no, I'm being serious this time. Like, So they try to do a little bit of comedy with it, like the idea that she's trying to teach him like the interpretations he's supposed to have. But
There are moments. There's the bit where he's essentially trying to force an argument because that will bring them closer. And
yes.
during this whole scene, he's like, "Oh, I'm drawing on all these things." I'm like, as I'm watching it, I was just like, "Were you talking to Riker again?" Because it just feels like he's doing a Riker impression for a lot of it.
Yeah, and then of course she points out that like, but you're forced. This isn't you. You're trying to like fabricate a spat so that we can make up after. It doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah.
I think the problem with this is that all of the lessons, all of the destinations of every single element of it are so, and this is partly a compliment to the show, that Data is so well defined, and we've went through so many different plots with Data and how he reacts to things and how he interacts with certain human ideas and stories and emotions and scenarios, that almost none of this was actually that interesting to watch, because I'm like, no, I know exactly how Data's going to say this. I know
We've
that
kind of seen all this and before and better for the most part.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that this is actually that bad. It's just it's just predictable.
Yes. And it's kind of I like the ending a little bit, because there's this sort of somber moment at the end where she leaves and he just sits there, but then his cat comes up and sits on his lap and
he's
pets
just bobbing his head like he's listening to music.
And he pets the cat, and I was like, this kind of goes back to something we've said before about Data saying he has no feelings, but it's just like, does he know how to interpret if the information he has, the programming he has, is in some way feeling? He just can't really think of it that way, because I mean, this ending felt like he cared about his cat, if nothing else.
Right. I think while we've been over this a lot, I think the in-universe logic for Data is he doesn't care about the cat. He just understands what caring about the cat looks like.
Yeah, and I think my argument to this in the past has been ultimately, at what point?
Enough. Yeah.
At what point does knowing that you have to care, just caring in a different disguise?
No. I think we are on the same side of this.
Yeah.
Almost all the time. It's just this is the way it presents it, at least.
Yeah, I guess it's not a bad idea for an episode, and it's not a bad exploration. But we already, I mean, let's be honest, Data deciding to give himself a kid is like the next stage of this, but we already did that. So going back to just him having a girlfriend just kind of feels like a step back in all the other things that Data's done.
It does. It feels like we should have done this a long time ago, and it probably would have been more effective then. And then I don't think it helps that the 10-minute section of the important plot was actually quite good, and I was way more into that than I was a lot of the other stuff in the episode.
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing, but there's some really good stuff in it. But at the same time, I don't think it fulfills any of its potential, because it is just, truncated to 10 minutes.
I wish we'd had that for an episode properly. Yeah, like that bit where Riker goes like, right, okay, I'm off the ship, and Picard's like, no, not this time. And he's like, I mean, it's kind of my duty as first officer, to protect everyone, and that kind of goes right back to the very first episode, right, where that was kind of his whole speech to Picard. Is like, no, I need to do things, not you. And this time Picard's like, no, this is too important. I need to pilot that.
Yeah,
and it's a good moment, and you've got. They're having to beam him out, and the usual, well, was he there or not, which never has any real tension, but it's still a nice moment.
Yeah, and then the shuttle explodes, but it gets them out the nebula, and, happy ending.
They just go floor it at the end, just get out of here, quick.
Yeah, so it's one of those, this is something that came up maybe a little bit back in like season 1, maybe some of 2 as well, was the idea that the B plot was more interesting, you wish that was the A plot. This is kind of it's kind of like that, but it's also a little bit different in that it does spend so little time in what the serious plot is going to be in the back half of the episode. There doesn't even feel like a B plot, really. It feels like a minor.
It's a detour.
Yeah, until it becomes the central premise of the episode, and everything else just gets dropped. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Do you know what? This is going to be weird to say, but I'm going to have to give Troy some cred here, because she's the only one who I actually think gives the best advice in this episode.
Maybe don't be a dick about this one, Data.
Yeah, maybe Data, that the way you approach things doesn't quite qualify to a relationship with a human being who's going to have feelings and blah blah blah. And I'm like, do you know what? Out of everyone here, she's actually the one who's made the most sense and kind of recommended maybe you should back away from this and don't do it.
I think it's weird, because I get that's the correct answer, especially from an outside perspective like this. But from the rest of them, all of them are his friends, and they're like, no, it might be good for you. They're kind of recommending, hey, just try it out. They're thinking about him and not her, basically, because they don't really care about her apart from Worf, apparently.
Worf cares about everyone who's because she mentions she's a casual line later where she mentions that she sweep the ship, so I think she is on the security staff specifically.
I think so, because he does say that he's one of his officers.
Yeah, so I think he's very protective of his officers that operate under him specifically. So yeah, fair play. He takes care of his crew. Actually, there was a really I mean, this isn't surprising.
Probably why he'll make quite a good captain.
But there was an oddly dark line about Klingons and how they don't court each other. You
conquest.
You take what you desire. I'm like, that sounds. I mean, fishy.
Yeah. Not good advice. And then he's like, but he does kind of go, but maybe don't do that. Basically.
Yes. That is Klingon way. Klingons are all into it. Maybe humans aren't as up for it.
Which, and I can appreciate that he's this is our culture. And that's what we do, so I can't really offer you advice because our advice would not be good in this situation. He's aware enough to be like, don't do this.
Yes, our rituals would get you arrested and put in jail. So, or court-martialed in this
switched
case.
off if you dare.
Switched off, yes. Is that a punishment? No. Really? He's not going to experience anything.
I mean, you could say the same about the death penalty by that logic.
I suppose it applies, yeah. But what I'm saying is, you want him to feel the misery of being in a cell and just staring at a wall.
Sure, I can't argue with that.
Admittedly, Data being Data, he would probably process that way better than a human being would. He'd just be like, oh, okay.
I'll just keep myself busy.
I'll just count the molecules on the wall in front of me. That'll keep me busy for a while.
I'll pass a few hours.
And then when he's done, he's like, you know what? Just in case I miss one, I'll do it again.
Just run through some calculations in his head. He'll be fine.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag of an episode. It's not a terrible episode by any means, but I have to admit, I think the premise seemed like it was going to be more fun than it actually was, and maybe just too much of it is a little bit of a rehash of things that we've done enough with Data that none of it really felt all that new or untread ground or surprising. Yeah,
there was no new angle on it, which I think every other one of these Data episodes has had some sort of angle that felt fresh to do with its idea. This didn't. Not really.
Yeah, I think what might have saved it for me is to have it more from her perspective, so we could really get into her head as to her making this mistake and convincing herself that he would feel something. And it's like, no, I mean, if you work with him every day, you know that isn't how he works. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So, hey ho, there you go. That's in theory. So next time is actually the season finale, season 4 finale, which is called
because it should be a big one, right?
Yeah, it's called Redemption. So here's the description on IMDb. Both Captain Picard and Lieutenant Worf must decide where their priorities lie as the Klingon Empire descends into a bitter civil war. That sounds like big stuff.
Cool, I like this. And this feels, obviously, it's time back to their history, like last season.
Mm-hmm.
But even more recently, the Klingon stuff just, was it last episode, the episode before?
Yeah, a few episodes ago.
Yeah, where it feels like, oh no, that's kind of, it was teasing stuff, it was relevant in kind of re-establishing where everyone is for that.
Yeah. No, it's not bad. So there you go. That's what's coming up next time. Let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show with some monies, you can do that over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. But yes, of course, the free way of doing it is simply hitting the like button on YouTube, and it is very important for getting the show out to more people, so please do hit it. Otherwise, that's us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is in control, but not in our reality. He's phasing through.